David, going back to something else you touched on, for many people, they have lost someone that they didn't get the chance to say,
yes, very much so.
I'm sorry,
Right.
or please forgive me.
That's a huge one, Ron. So what I would work on in the grief side with them is I say to them, there's still a way we can do that.
Yeah.
We can still do that.
Right.
It's not as, I wish we could do it face to face.
Right, yes, yeah.
So let's find ways to do that.
Right.
So it takes time, and it's not something, I mean, sometimes people think, oh, I just do this and that's it. No, there's a process that takes a fair amount of time. So we will work, and there's a lot of emotions that have to come up.
Right.
So whenever there's forgiveness, there's always going to be anger somewhere.
Yes.
Because there's injustice done to
Yes,
you.
right.
So there's always going to be that. So we have to deal with that emotion.
Right.
There can be regret over what was done, was not done. So we have to deal with those things.
Right.
So I don't think there's one simple way. I mean, people talk about, well, you write a letter and that's it. Well, I think a letter writing can be important, and it's a good tool.
Right.
But there's a lot more to it than just
Right.
one thing.
Right.
But I've worked with many people who have had huge pieces. I think the biggest ones that I've worked with are adults who were abused sexually and physically by an older person, and they died.
Yes.
And this person has never had any forgiveness from them.
And how do you deal with that?
And I've had it reversed. I've had it from the abuser, where the person they abused died, and they never did forgive. So ask for forgiveness. That one's even more difficult.
Wow.
So we can work with it because forgiveness is not always about the other person. Forgiveness is, what is this, what am I carrying in my life as a result of what happened?
Right.
What am I carrying that I don't want to carry anymore?
And I don't want to look at
and I don't want to look
with.
at it.
Right.
So it's about, how do I get rid of what's in me?
Right.
So I'm carrying all this anger and this injustice and this revenge, all these things that as the result of something that happened.
Right.
So I don't need that person to find forgiveness.
Right.
I need to find a way to get rid of what I've been carrying that I don't want to carry anymore.
Right. Yes.
And death is often one of those pieces that you're right. If we don't get a chance to do those before the death, it's very difficult after. But it can be done.
Right.
But it's going to take some work.
Okay. With when you're engaging families and that, what are some of the other things they need to do to face their dying and to be prepared?
I think the greatest thing that we need to look at are, how do we prepare what will happen at death for families? So, making sure, in a very practical term, making sure your finances are in order.
Right.
I mean, oh, Ron, you won't believe the messes that get left.
Wow.
At death.
Which leaves some anger.
Oh,
right?
I had to break up a physical fight at the palliative unit one time between two brothers. The mom's laying there dying, and they're in a fist fight because one thinks they got something in the will, the other one didn't. Right? and here's poor mom sitting there watching this, unable to do anything. Right? So how do we, let's get this out early. Let's say, okay, here's where we're at, and let's deal with this so it's not a crisis.
So that's something else to talk about and
Very
deal
practical.
with as and especially as a parent. And
absolutely. And if there's conflict with the kids, then you better figure that out before you die because it gets magnified afterwards.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I'll say, and this is funny, people, when I talk about advanced care planning, immediately people think about, funeral arrangements. I've made my funeral arrangements. Most people will say, I want to make my funeral arrangements so my kids don't have to do that. And I respect that. I think, I know that makes it a little easier, smoother. I laugh, I tell people I have a different philosophy though.
Okay.
I'm not doing that for my kids.
Oh, really?
I want them to experience what this is like. So my goal, though, if that's true, my my responsibility is to make sure my kids know what I want.
Okay.
I want my kids to know that when it comes to picking out a casket for Dad,
yes.
Oh, Dad would like that one. He wouldn't like that one.
Right, right.
They need to know me well enough
to know what to do.
To know what to do.
Right.
And my job, if I can do that, which is relational.
Right.
If they know me well enough to know what I want, I think I'm successful.
Well, you shared a little bit of that at lunch with us, right?
Yeah.
One of your desires, when...
So they know, and I think, but I'm not saying that's for everybody. I mean, some people it's easier to go and get that done. But for me, I think...
But the cremated part.
Yeah.
You got to tell that one.
Oh, no, you don't want that one, do you?
Oh, yeah, you got to tell that.
Well, this is Ron's pushing me, so I wouldn't really tell that one. I was giving an award speech to a Rotary Club, and they wanted to know all about my work and what I did at hospice and working with people in dying, and so I ended it with just saying to them, all of this work with death at least has helped me understand how I want to die and what's important. And I said, for instance, I've decided I want to be cremated. Right. That's for sure.
Right.
And the reason is because for once in my life, I want to have a hot smoking body. So they laughed, fortunately. I wasn't sure whether it was going to be funny or not. But,
well, I know your wife told you not to tell the story. But we have the same twisted sense of humor. So,
But I think, we can get, I don't mean we get comfortable to the place where, I'm not looking forward to dying.
No.
That's not the point. I'm not morbid. I don't think about it all the time. But I am not afraid to talk about it.
Right.
And I'm not afraid to recognize that if we can do this in a good way, then it will take away. Because I guarantee you, Ron, that people who are not talking about it, it's in their mind.
Sure.
So I've had families who will say to me, "Can you talk to Dad? Because he's not talking about it. He's not saying anything. He doesn't want to talk about anything. He just shuts us down."
Right.
So when I go in and we start, I may need to say something like, "You know what? I have no doubt you're thinking about this all the time."
Right.
It's always on your mind.
Yeah.
And they'll say, "Yep." And then that lets us go.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned when we were in conversation was about people who say, and I've heard it said, "Look, I don't want anything."
Oh, right.
I don't want my family to worry about it.
Right.
I don't want a service. You know what? When I'm dead, just that's it.
Right. Yes, and so what they often say is, when they've made that comment, I'll say to them, "So you're trying to make it convenient."
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I'm trying to make it convenient.
Right.
I don't want to make it difficult.
Right.
And I will say to them,
and easy.
Death is always inconvenient.
Right.
It's supposed to be inconvenient.
Right.
And guess what? You won't be here.
Right.
Your body might be here.
Yes. Yeah.
But what did they need? If I'm really brave, I can say something like, "The truth is, once you're dead, it's not about you.
Right.
It's about what's best for your family.
Right.
And what do they need?"
Right.
And as I said to you earlier at one point, we need public expression of grief.
Yes.
When I said it takes a village to die, it takes a village to grieve well.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
So and this is what COVID has really, one of the difficulties of COVID is that it has postponed a lot of that.
Everything got shut down.
Everything got shut down. And so what I would hear is, we're postponing the funeral till when COVID opens. The truth is they're not going to.
Right.
They're not going to have it because so much time has passed. They're going to say, "Well, we don't need to."
Right.
But the truth is, we do need. I think everybody deserves to have this expression of family and friends and neighbors who gather to share the grief that we have. It's different for everybody. But to be able to say, "You know that Ron? He was a great guy, wasn't he? Isn't he funny?" And to talk about that in a way that allows us to process
Right.
that.
To both laugh and
cry.
Yes.
So one of my little pet peeves is this: we've changed language, right? So now it's not funerals; we have celebrations of life.
Right.
I understand what we're trying to say,
Right.
but I remember I was at a celebration of life, and I remember going afterwards and saying to my wife, you know what? If I didn't know that person had died, I would think they were there.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody said a word about their death.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I think it's important to
That's
talk
not
about
fair.
life,
Yeah.
what the person was like. But at some point we have to say, it's so sad that they died.
Yes.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
I feel sad they died.
Yeah.
But we're afraid to say that, even at that point.
Right.
Because we don't want to. We want to just make it like they're still living.
Right. Everything's easy. Everything's just
easy.
normal.
Right.
And there is no grief.
And there's no grief. Right.
The grief in the morning.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the grief and the mourning?
Okay. So mourning is this, if you like, well, let me talk about bereavement. Bereavement is this overarching term that when you experience a loss, then you are bereaved.
Right.
That's the term. You're bereaved. Grief is what happens to you, and you don't get to choose.
Okay.
It hits you.
Yes.
And it hits us all differently, but it hits us in every area of our life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, cognitively, socially.
Right.
It affects us differently in those areas, and you don't get to choose.
Right.
You don't get to ask, oh, I don't want that. Wham, it's there.
Yeah.
Mourning is our choice of how we get to express outwardly what grief is doing inwardly.
Inside. Yes.
So mourning, the funeral is a mourning experience.
Right.
It's the expression outwardly of what grief is inwardly.
Right.
So we are going to be affected in all of those areas. And we're going to laugh and cry, and we're going to memory, and we're going to share. Yeah. And it's that outward expression. Yeah. So mourning, and some religions and cultures have very clear cultural pieces to mourning.
Right.
We do a terrible job with that.
I think so.
And again, what COVID has done is shut down the few that we did have.
Right.
And I'm really concerned.
Right.
So in a couple of days, I'm doing a webinar workshop for the funeral directors of BC.
Right.
And we're talking about the loss of ritual and how that really impacts not just our grief, but I think it impacts us as a culture and society.
Yes, yeah.
We kind of say like, well, let's not have death part of it.
Right.
How do we mourn our death?
Right.
How do we mourn and express that this person has lived and now has died? And that's where I think we have an obligation. Right. So when somebody says, like you said, I don't want anything.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not my job to change their mind.
Right.
My job is to open their mind. Right. To allow them to see that maybe my family needs. So what I will say to them is, can we have that conversation with your family?
Yes.
Can I hear what they want?
Right.
And can you allow them to say what they want to say? So that often is a different piece.
So let's say, let's say they said, no, I don't want that, but they're dead. Mm-hmm. Now you're dealing with a family. Right. And they're in this grief, looking for an expression of mourning. Right. Is it okay to say, look, that was about how they felt, but this is about how you're feeling. Right. Let's talk about how we're going to mourn the loss.
And that's exactly what we do. But and unfortunately, what that person has just put onto them is a whole layer of guilt.
Right.
Right. If
Which
I
you
go
have to
against
work
their
through
wishes,
again,
then I've got guilt.
Right.
So I'll do exactly that, Ron. I'll say, okay, that was their wishes. Right. That's what they wanted. Right. You didn't do a funeral. Right. What do we need to do? Yeah. What do you need to do? Okay. What would be important to you? Yeah. What if we had a dinner? Right. Right. What if we had brought together all his family, his friends, and had something in the park? Right. What if we had a big bonfire and sat around, told stories? What do you need to do? Right.
It becomes about that mourning journey, which is all about life too.
All about living and life, and how do I find a place in this life for that grief?
Right.
So I will try to separate. That's what they wanted,
right?
And we don't. We'll honor that,
right?
But what do you need?
Yes. Okay.
How can we do it? And that might look quite different,
right?
But it's something.
Yeah.
And whatever we can work on.
And it may even be separate from what the person was initially saying. I don't want the funeral and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know.
Yeah.
So we'll respect that, but now it's about you.
Now it's about us.
What would you What would you like?
So I'm inviting people to come and help us in our grief by telling stories about this person.
And one of the final questions we had thrown out there was, how do you do this without it becoming depressing?
Again, I think two things. The avoidance of death as a reality can really lead to depressing because it eats away at us.
Okay, yes.
I honestly believe...
we see it coming anyway.
We see it coming. So I honestly believe if we can talk about it, then I don't have to worry about it the way I did.
Right.
You know what? I know what's going to... I know it's coming, but I also... Everybody knows what's important to me when that happens.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave that.
Yeah.
For me, as a worker, a supportive care counselor, I have to realize that when I work with people who are dying, that's their moment. Right. I'm there to do what I can with those moments. My moment's coming, but it's not now. This isn't my moment.
Right.
And so it's not a depression. Death impacts me. There's been many times when I've been with a person who's died and I've had to just go for a walk.
Yes, yes.
I've had to just leave and go in the woods for me.
Right.
Get my kayak, be on the water.
Yeah.
Something that allows me to reconnect with life.
Right.
But I never want to get to a place where I can't be with death. Death is a part of us.
Right.
It's all around us.
Yeah.
And spring is the renewal of life after death.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that circle.
Right.
And if we can, I don't want to be morbid, and people think that of me. I'm not morbid. I'm not.
No.
I mean, you know me.
Yeah.
But I'm not. It's part of it, and I'm not afraid of it.
Well, actually, David, you were anything but morbid. When we get together, and we can talk about at the same time these conversations we've had about death, but we usually end up laughing about life, and thoroughly enjoying it, and maybe that's part of it that we've
Well, if I know there's an end, then I want to enjoy what I have.
Yes,
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
So why would I? Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share as we sort of wrap up today?
Well, I think, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to allow this topic to come out, because where else do we get to talk about it?
Well, in close, can I ask you, and for you to think about it, maybe it's not this session, but another one, what was one of the most meaningful moments for you?
Oh, my gosh.
And I haven't given you time to think about it. But even just
have I got 2 minutes?
Yes, yeah.
So this happened. I retired from hospice in May. This happened a year ago. So in January, a year ago.
Right.
I was very busy. We were a very busy hospice. We had a new admission coming in, and at rounds that morning, all I knew was he was 35 years old, and that he had been estranged from his family. He was very end of life. He was terrified of death.
Right.
And he was going to need some help. So they said, David, can you schedule him in when he comes? Fine. That was on a Wednesday. And Wednesday, the rest of the day, I already had booked with clients. We have about 120 in the community, let alone the other. So I was booked, and it was a crazy day, and he didn't come in till late afternoon anyway. So the next day, I thought, I'll let him get settled. He'll be there. I'll go and see him tomorrow, Thursday. So Thursday came, and wouldn't you know it, we had a crisis in one of my cases in the community, and everything was going crazy, and I ended up spending most of the day there, actually, getting things organized. And I didn't get back to hospice until 4:30. And normally I finish at 5.
Right.
And I had all my notes to do and my paperwork to get caught up. And about 10 after 5, I thought, oh my gosh, I hadn't gone up to see him yet. And I promised I would. So I grabbed my coat and my stuff for home, and I stopped at the nurse's station, and I said, how is, and I'll use Bill, it's not his name, how is Bill? Not well, he's not doing good, he's quite distraught. His mother is in there now. His mother lived in a community about an hour and a half away from Peterborough. He had no contact with his other siblings, has not had them. He's been on the streets, he's a drug addict. So I said, I'm going to go in and see them. I'll tell them, I'll at least meet them, and I'll tell them I'll be in Friday morning. So I go into the room, and I walk in, and Mom is sitting there on one side of the bed holding his hand. Now, I said I've been with a lot of people, so nothing, it takes a lot to shock me. At the same time, you can't show shock, right? Even if you see it. But Ron, I've never seen, two things problematic. One, I've never seen such a gaunt, skeletal human being who's still living. And secondly, he's the exact age as my son. So all I could imagine was my son laying there. So I come in, he's still verbal. And so I said, but he hadn't been talking to the nursing staff. So I introduced myself, and he reached up and he grabbed my hand, and he wouldn't let go. And I walked slowly around the edge of the bed, sticking my hands out as far as I could, and I sat down on this side of the bed, holding his hand. His mom had his hand on the other side, and he looked at me, and he was filled with terror. And I said to him, Bill, you look like you're terrified of dying. And he just went like this. And, that's the moment when you think, okay, now what? What do I say? Help me here, God. What do I say? So I sat there in silence. He wouldn't let go of my hand. And his mom had his other. And then I said, you know what, Bill? I said, your mom was with you when you were born. And she loved you from the moment you were born. And your mom is here with you as you die. And your mom loves you. You will be loved coming into this world, and you are loved going out of this world. And it doesn't matter anything about your life. What matters is this place is filled with love for you. And his mom started to talk. She was crying, and she said, oh, Bill, I was so proud of you. I loved you so much. You were always so kind. And for the next 20 minutes, she told stories of how much his life was valued. There was no mention of his drug addiction, no mention of his time on the streets or his failings. And I just sat there, and I watched his face go from terror to absolute calmness. And he just gradually let go of my hand. And his mom's just held on. And we just sat there. And I said, Bill, I'm going to go. Because I felt I was out of place. This was mom and son. I said, I'm going to go. But I want you to know that this place is full of love for you. And that's how you're going to die. Knowing that you're loved. And he just closed his eyes. And then I left. That, you can tell that still stays with me. It has impacted me. The power of death that can be healing. We never think about. That was his healing moment to hear in his life from his mom how much he was loved.
Wouldn't have happened on the street.
It couldn't have happened on the street. Wouldn't have happened.
Or in the home at any other time.
This is a gift.
It's and you know what, David? Those moments are a gift to us.
I'm a different person.
Who get to be there.
I walked out of that room a different person. I can't help it.
Impacts our life.
So I've got tons of those stories. But that one's fresh.
Well, we'll pick up on some more of those stories another time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for your friendship and the value and meaning that you've given to my life and my family, and the friends that know
It goes both ways.
Someone said, you know, like David is known across Canada, and a very positive. They said he's a very humble person who doesn't really understand how much he is giving, and I can reiterate that.
Yeah.
So thank you for making this day, these moments meaningful for us.
Thank you.